The apartment felt different that Thursday evening, like the air itself had turned against me. I sat in my home office, pretending to work on a client's cybersecurity audit while Aven primped for her company's quarterly celebration. Through the bedroom door, I could hear her rifling through designer dresses, each one costing more than most people's monthly rent. "Drake," she called, her voice carrying that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over our 3 years of marriage. It was the same voice she used with service workers and telemarketers, polite but dismissive, like she was speaking to someone beneath her station. I saved my work and walked to the bedroom doorway. Aven stood before our full-length mirror, adjusting a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly consulting fee. Her reflection caught mine, and for a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Not love, not even affection. Something closer to irritation. "I've been thinking about tonight," she said, not turning around. Her fingers worked at an earring, a diamond piece her parents had given her for our first anniversary. "It might be better if you stayed home." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. 20 years of military training had taught me to control my reactions, even when the ground was shifting beneath my feet. "Any particular reason?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Aven finally turned to face me. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in that effortless way that took 2 hours to achieve. She looked beautiful, successful, everything a corporate PR executive should be. She also looked embarrassed. "Drake, you know I love you," she began, and I immediately knew whatever came next would hurt. "But tonight is important for my career. There will be senior partners there, potential clients, people who could really make a difference for my future." "Our future," I corrected gently. She paused, and in that pause, I heard everything she wasn't saying. "Of course, our future," she said quickly. "But you have to understand, these people, they have expectations. They're used to a certain type of spouse, corporate types, lawyers, doctors, not ex-military cybersecurity consultants who work from home," I finished for her. "It's not that there's anything wrong with what you do," Aven said, her voice taking on that practiced tone she used in client meetings. "It's just that they might not understand. They might think you're just some computer guy, and that reflects on me, on my judgment." I stood there, watching my wife explain why she was ashamed of me, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not anger, not yet. Something more calculating. "So you want me to stay home?" I said. "Just for tonight. Please, Drake. This promotion could change everything for us. The Hendersons will be there, and you know how important their account is. If I can land them as clients..." She trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. If she landed the Henderson account, she'd make senior associate. If she made senior associate, she'd finally be worthy of the social circle she'd been trying to crack since college. "Of course," I said, and I saw relief flood her features. "You're the best," she said, rising on her toes to kiss my cheek. Her lips felt cold against my skin. "I'll make it up to you, I promise. Maybe we can go to that steakhouse you like this weekend." The steakhouse I liked. Not the one we liked, not our favorite place. The one I liked, like a consolation prize for good behavior. "Sounds great," I said. "Have fun tonight." Aven grabbed her purse, a designer bag that cost more than most people's car payments, and headed for the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at me with something that might have been guilt. "You understand, right? It's just business." "I understand perfectly," I said. And I did. I understood that my wife was embarrassed by me. I understood that she saw me as a liability to her carefully constructed image. I understood that she'd rather lie to her colleagues about why her husband wasn't there than risk them meeting the man she'd married. Most importantly, I understood that our marriage was already over. She just didn't know it yet. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and I stood alone in our apartment. Our apartment. Funny how quickly that was going to change. I walked back to my office and sat down at my computer. The cybersecurity audit could wait. I had more pressing work to do. First, I logged into our shared cloud account. Aven had insisted on sharing everything when we got married. Photos, documents, even email backups. No secrets between us, she'd said. It was touching, really, how much she trusted me, or how little she understood about digital privacy. The files downloaded quickly. 3 years of emails, text message backups, photo albums, financial records. Everything. I copied it all to an encrypted drive, then started sorting through the data with the same methodical approach I used for client security audits. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. The first email was from 6 months ago. "Hey, beautiful. Great meeting you at the conference. Can't wait to work together more closely." It was signed V and sent from a corporate email address I recognized. Vance Monroe, senior partner at Aven's firm. Married, 2 kids, and apparently very interested in my wife's career development. The emails progressed from professional to personal to intimate over the course of weeks. By month 3, they were planning weekend getaways to discuss strategy. By month 5, Aven was signing her emails, "Forever yours." I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. 3 years of marriage, and my wife had been having an affair with her boss for half a year. The same boss she'd be seeing tonight at the party she was too embarrassed to take me to. The irony was almost beautiful. I kept reading, building a timeline. Hotel receipts charged to our joint credit card for rooms I'd never seen. Dinner bills for 2 at restaurants she claimed to be eating at alone. Gift purchases that never made it home to me. But the real treasure was in her text messages. Aven had been backing up her phone to the cloud automatically, and she'd never bothered to check what was being saved. Every conversation with Vance was there, along with messages to her friends about their secret romance and how she was planning to upgrade her situation once she made partner. There was even a conversation with her friend Cassie about how she planned to divorce me once her career was secure. "Drake's sweet, but he's not going anywhere in life. I need someone with ambition, someone who can match my energy. Vance gets it. He understands what I need." What she needed, not what we needed as a couple, but what she needed for her image, her career, her social status. I printed everything, every email, every text, every receipt. The paper trail was damning and complete. Then I made digital copies on 3 separate drives and uploaded backups to a secure server I maintained for client work. By the time I was finished, it was nearly midnight. Aven would be home soon, probably tipsy from champagne and glowing from whatever attention Vance had given her at the party. I looked around our apartment. My apartment, actually, since the lease was in my name from before we were married. Aven had moved in after our wedding, bringing her furniture and her ambitions and her slow, steady disappointment in the man she'd chosen. Time to pack. I started with her clothes, folding each designer dress and expensive blouse with military precision. Everything went into the suitcases she'd bought for our honeymoon, back when she still pretended to be happy with me. Her jewelry went into a separate case, including the diamond earrings and the wedding ring she'd left on the dresser while she got ready. Her work laptop went into its carrying case, along with the files she kept at home. I was careful not to access anything. I wasn't interested in corporate espionage, just a clean separation of assets. The personal items were harder. Photos of us from better times, gifts I'd given her, little mementos from our early relationship. I packed them anyway. She could decide what to do with the memories. By 1:30 a.m., Aven's entire life was packed into 4 suitcases and 3 boxes. I arranged them neatly by the front door, then sat down to write a note. The first draft was angry, full of accusations and hurt feelings. The second was too long, explaining everything I'd found and how betrayed I felt. The third was perfect. "Aven, you said you were embarrassed to introduce me as your husband. I've solved that problem. You have nothing to be ashamed of anymore." The divorce papers are inside the red suitcase, along with copies of everything I found. Your keys won't work. The locks have been changed. You can pick up your things anytime after 8 a.m. Don't bother calling. We have nothing left to discuss. Drake. I sealed the note in an envelope and taped it to the largest suitcase, then called a 24-hour locksmith. For an extra fee, he agreed to come out immediately and change the locks. Professional courtesy, he said, one security expert to another. The locksmith finished his work at 2:15 a.m. I paid him in cash and watched through the peephole as he disappeared down the hallway. At 2:23 a.m., I heard heels clicking on the hardwood floor outside my door. Aven's laugh echoed in the hallway, followed by a deeper voice I didn't recognize but could guess at. Vance had walked her home. How romantic. The voices stopped outside my door. I heard Aven fumble with her keys, then the sound of metal scraping against the new lock that wouldn't turn. "That's weird," she said, her voice slightly slurred. "My key isn't working." "Maybe you're using the wrong one," Vance suggested. "No, this is definitely—" "Oh." I imagined her seeing the suitcases, the boxes, the note with her name on it. There was a long moment of silence, then the sound of paper tearing as she opened the envelope. "What does it say?" Vance asked. Aven's voice was very small when she answered. "He knows." "Knows what?" "Everything." I heard them talking in urgent whispers, but I couldn't make out the words. It didn't matter. The message was delivered. The first move was made. At 2:45 a.m., I heard them dragging the suitcases toward the elevator. Aven never knocked on the door, never tried to call, never attempted to explain or apologize. She just took her things and left. I sat in my chair by the window and watched them load everything into Vance's BMW. Even from 6 floors up, I could see the tension in their body language. This wasn't how either of them had planned for their affair to be discovered. As they drove away, I opened my laptop and began typing the first of several emails I'd be sending over the next few days. The game was just beginning, and I intended to win. After all, I was a cybersecurity expert. I knew how to find weaknesses in any system, including the carefully constructed facade of my wife's professional life. Aven thought she was embarrassed by me before. She had no idea what embarrassment really looked like, but she was about to learn. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop, methodically planning my next moves like I was designing a security audit. Every system has vulnerabilities, and every vulnerability can be exploited if you know where to look. Aven's system had more holes than Swiss cheese. By sunrise, I had a complete dossier on my wife's affair. Not just the romantic details, but the financial implications. She'd been using our joint credit card to fund her relationship with Vance, hotel rooms, dinners, gifts, even a weekend trip to Napa that she'd told me was a work conference. More interesting was what I'd found in Vance's digital footprint. The man wasn't as careful as he thought. His LinkedIn profile boasted about his ethical leadership and family values. His company bio mentioned his wife Margaret and their 2 teenage daughters. His social media was full of photos from family vacations and anniversary dinners. I wondered how Margaret would feel about her husband's extracurricular activities. At 7 a.m., my phone rang. Aven's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times in the next hour. I deleted each message without listening. At 9:15, she tried a different approach. A text message appeared. "Drake, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain everything." I replied immediately. "The divorce papers are non-negotiable. Have your lawyer contact mine." "I don't have a lawyer." "You should probably get one." My phone stayed quiet after that. I spent the morning researching divorce law in our state. No-fault divorce, equitable distribution of assets, standard waiting periods. Everything was straightforward since we had no children and most of our major assets were in my name from before the marriage. The apartment lease, the car I drove, even the furniture, all mine. Aven had contributed her income to our joint expenses, but she'd never actually invested in anything permanent. She'd been too focused on her career to think about building a life. That oversight was about to cost her. At noon, I drove to the office of Patricia Wells, a divorce attorney whose reputation for aggressive representation was legendary in our city. She could see me immediately, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously she took cases involving infidelity evidence. "This is quite comprehensive," Patricia said, flipping through the printed emails and financial records I'd brought. "Your wife wasn't very careful about covering her tracks." "She trusted me," I said. "She thought I was too simple to figure it out." Patricia smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Simple men don't compile evidence files this thorough. You said you work in cybersecurity?" 20 years military intelligence, 5 years private sector. I know how to investigate. It shows. This affair has been going on for 6 months, you said. Almost 7. The evidence goes back to their first contact. And she's been using joint funds to support the relationship. Hotel rooms, dinners, gifts. I have receipts for everything. Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Torin, in a no-fault state, adultery doesn't typically affect property division, but financial misconduct during marriage is a different story. If she's been using marital assets to fund an extramarital relationship, that's considered waste of marital property." "What does that mean practically?" "It means she'll owe you reimbursement for every penny she spent on her affair. Hotel rooms, dinners, gifts, all of it comes out of her share of any settlement." I felt something that might have been satisfaction settle in my chest. "How much are we talking about?" Patricia pulled out a calculator and started adding numbers. "Based on these receipts, roughly $12,000 over 6 months. In a marriage with limited assets, that's significant." "There's more," I said, pulling out another folder. "She's been lying to her employer about business expenses. Some of these hotel stays were charged to the company as business travel, but they were actually personal trips with her boss." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "That's expense fraud. Her employer might be very interested in this information." I thought they might be. We spent another hour going over the details. Patricia would file the divorce papers immediately, citing irreconcilable differences but including a detailed accounting of the financial misconduct. She'd also prepare a formal demand for reimbursement of the wasted marital assets. "One more thing," I said as I prepared to leave. "Her boss, Vance Monroe, he's married with children. His wife might be interested in knowing about his relationship with my wife." Patricia's smile returned. "That's not something I can advise you on professionally." "Of course not. But hypothetically, if someone were to receive evidence of their spouse's infidelity, they'd probably want to consult with their own attorney." "Hypothetically, yes, they probably would." I left Patricia's office with a clear plan and a timeline. The divorce papers would be served at Aven's workplace the next day. The financial demands would follow within a week, and Margaret Monroe would receive a very interesting package in her mailbox before the weekend. But first I had a phone call to make. I drove to a coffee shop across town and used their Wi-Fi to create a new email address. Then I composed a message to the HR department at Aven's company. "To whom it may concern, I have reason to believe that employees at your firm have been submitting fraudulent expense reports and engaging in inappropriate workplace relationships that may violate company policy. I have documentation that supports these concerns and would be happy to provide it to the appropriate personnel for investigation. Please advise how you would like to proceed." I attached a few sample receipts, enough to show I was serious, not enough to reveal everything I had. Then I sent the email and waited. The response came within 2 hours. Margaret Chen, Director of Human Resources, wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss my concerns. She could see me the following afternoon. Perfect. That evening, I sat in my quiet apartment and ordered dinner from a Thai place Aven had never liked. I ate slowly, savoring both the food and the silence. For the first time in months, I felt relaxed. My phone buzzed with another text from Aven. "Drake, please. I made a mistake, but we can work through this. Don't throw away 3 years of marriage over one stupid decision. One stupid decision. As if a 6-month affair was a momentary lapse in judgment. I replied, it wasn't one decision. It was hundreds of decisions, made every day for 6 months. Every lie, every secret meeting, every time you came home and pretended to love me while you were planning your exit strategy. Those were all choices, Aven. You made them. Now live with the consequences. She didn't reply. At 10 p.m., I received a call from an unknown number. I answered on the third ring. Drake Torrin? The voice was male, older, with the kind of authority that comes from years in corner offices. Speaking. This is Vance Monroe. I think we need to talk. I leaned back in my chair. I don't think we do. Look, I know you're upset about Aven, but there's no need to involve other people in this. We can work something out man to man. Man to man? I couldn't help laughing. You've been sleeping with my wife for 6 months, and you want to work something out? It's not what you think. Aven and I, we have a connection. We're in love. This isn't just some fling. Oh, I know exactly what it is. I've read all your emails, Vance. Every romantic message, every promise you made her, every lie you told your wife to cover your tracks. There was silence on the other end of the line. What do you want? He finally asked. I want you to stay away from my wife during the divorce proceedings. I want you to stop using company resources to fund your relationship. And I want you to think very carefully about whether your career and your marriage are worth protecting. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you advice. You're a smart man, Vance. You've built a good life, a successful career, a family. Ask yourself if my wife is worth losing all of that. I hung up before he could respond. Within minutes, my phone was ringing again. This time, it was Aven. What did you say to Vance? She demanded. I told him the truth, something you should try sometime. Drake, you don't understand. He could lose everything. His job, his family. Good. How can you be so cruel? This isn't like you. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. You're right. The old Drake would have been understanding. He would have tried to work things out, maybe even blamed himself for not being good enough for you. But that Drake was married to a woman who loved him. You're not her. I do love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of having a backup plan. You love having someone to pay half the bills while you figure out your next move. But you don't love me, Aven. You're embarrassed by me, remember? The line went quiet. The divorce papers will be served tomorrow, I continued. After that, all communication goes through our lawyers. Don't call me again. I hung up and turned off my phone. The apartment felt different now, not empty, but peaceful. I'd lived alone for years before Aven moved in, and I'd been happy then. I could be happy again. But first, I had work to finish. I opened my laptop and began preparing the package for Margaret Monroe. Photos, emails, hotel receipts, credit card statements, everything her husband thought was secret. I arranged it all in chronological order, with a brief cover letter explaining how I'd discovered the affair. Mrs. Monroe, I wrote, I'm sorry to be the bearer of difficult news, but I believe you have the right to know about your husband's relationship with my wife. I've included documentation that speaks for itself. If you need any additional information, please don't hesitate to contact me. I printed everything, put it in a manila envelope, and addressed it to Margaret Monroe at her home address. Tomorrow morning, I'd drop it in the mail. By the weekend, both Vance and Aven would discover what real embarrassment felt like. I'd spent 3 years being the understanding husband, the supportive partner, the man who stayed in the background while his wife chased her ambitions. I'd been patient, accommodating, invisible. Those days were over. Now, it was my turn to take center stage. The next morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I dressed carefully, dark suit, conservative tie, the kind of outfit that said serious professional rather than bitter ex-husband. Appearances mattered, especially when you were about to destroy someone's career. My first stop was the post office, where I mailed the package to Margaret Monroe with delivery confirmation. She'd have it by tomorrow afternoon, right around the time her husband would be getting home from work. I wondered if they'd discuss it over dinner. My second stop was downtown, to the gleaming glass tower that housed Brennan, Associates and Partners, Aven's prestigious PR firm. I'd been there exactly twice during our marriage, once for a company Christmas party where Aven had introduced me as my husband, he works with computers, and once to pick her up after her car broke down. Both times, I'd felt like an outsider looking in at a world I didn't understand or particularly want to join. Today, I felt different. Today, I belonged here as much as anyone. The lobby was all marble and chrome, designed to intimidate visitors and remind them that this was a place where important people made important decisions. I walked to the reception desk with the confidence of a man who had an appointment and a purpose. "Drake Torrin to see Margaret Chen," I told the receptionist. 15th floor, suite 1520. The elevators are just past the security desk. I rode up in silence, watching the floor numbers climb. Somewhere in this building, Aven was probably at her desk, handling client calls and pretending her life wasn't falling apart. I wondered if Vance had told her about our conversation, or if she was still hoping this would all blow over. Margaret Chen's office was smaller than I'd expected, but organized with the precision of someone who dealt with problems for a living. She was a woman in her 50s, professionally dressed, with the kind of direct gaze that suggested she didn't have time for games. "Mr. Torrin," she said, standing to shake my hand. "Thank you for coming in. Please, have a seat." I settled into the chair across from her desk and placed a thick folder on the table between us. "I understand you have concerns about expense fraud and workplace relationships," she said, opening a legal pad. "That's correct. My wife, Aven Torrin, has been having an affair with her supervisor, Vance Monroe, for approximately 6 months. During that time, they've been using company resources to fund their relationship." Margaret's pen stopped moving. "Those are serious allegations." "I have documentation." I opened the folder and began laying out evidence. Hotel receipts showing business charges for personal trips. Credit card statements proving joint travel that wasn't work-related. Email communications that clearly show a romantic relationship between a supervisor and subordinate. Margaret examined each document carefully, making notes as she went. Her expression remained neutral, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. "This is quite comprehensive," she said finally. "How did you obtain these communications?" "My wife and I shared cloud storage and email accounts. Everything here was legally accessible to me as her spouse." "And you're certain about the timeline? The relationship began while they were working together?" "The first romantic email is dated 6 months ago. I can provide additional documentation going back to their initial professional contact if needed." Margaret closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Torrin, I need to ask, what outcome are you hoping for here?" It was a fair question, and I'd prepared for it. "I want the company to be aware of potential policy violations and financial impropriety. What you do with that information is up to you." "You're not seeking any kind of settlement or compensation?" "No. I'm seeking a divorce from my wife and want to ensure that all relevant information is available to the appropriate parties." Margaret nodded slowly. "I appreciate your directness. We'll need to conduct a full investigation, of course. This kind of allegation requires careful review." "Of course. I'm happy to provide additional documentation if needed." "That may not be necessary. We have our own methods of verifying expense reports and communications." I stood to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. My wife doesn't know I'm here. I'd prefer to keep it that way until your investigation is complete." "That's standard procedure. We don't discuss ongoing investigations with the subjects." I left the building feeling lighter than I had in months. The wheels of corporate justice moved slowly, but they were thorough. Within a week, both Aven and Vance would be facing formal inquiries into their conduct, But I wasn't finished yet. My next stop was across town, to a small office in an older building where Rex Morrison ran his private investigation business. Rex and I had served together in military intelligence, and he'd helped me transition to civilian cybersecurity work when I left the service. "Drake," he said, standing to greet me with a firm handshake. "Good to see you, man, though I'm guessing this isn't a social call. I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" I explained the situation briefly, the affair, the divorce, the evidence I'd already gathered. Rex listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. "So what do you need from me?" he asked when I finished. "Background on Vance Monroe, financial records, previous relationships, anything that might be relevant to his character." "You want me to dig up dirt?" "I want you to find the truth. If there's no dirt to find, that's fine too." Rex leaned back in his chair. "Drake, I've known you for 15 years. You're not the vindictive type. You sure you want to go down this road?" "She was embarrassed to introduce me as her husband," I said quietly. "She told me to stay home from her work party because I wasn't good enough for her colleagues. Then she went to that party with the man she's been cheating with for 6 months." Rex winced. "Okay, I get it. Give me 3 days." "What's your rate?" "For you? Nothing. Consider it a wedding gift I never gave you." I tried to protest, but Rex waved me off. "You helped me set up my computer security when I started this business. We're even." I left Rex's office and drove home, feeling the satisfaction of a plan in motion. Every piece was falling into place. Every vulnerability in Aven's carefully constructed life was being systematically exploited. That afternoon, I received a call from Patricia Wells. "The divorce papers have been served," she said. "Your wife received them at her workplace about an hour ago." "How did she take it?" "According to the process server, she was professional but clearly upset. She asked if there was any way to delay the proceedings." "And?" "I told him to inform her that all communication should go through her attorney once she retains one." "Perfect." "There's something else, Drake. She called my office directly about 20 minutes ago asking to speak with you. She said it was urgent." "What did you tell her?" "That I don't facilitate communication between estranged spouses. If she wants to discuss the divorce terms, she needs to get her own lawyer." I smiled. Patricia was earning her fee. That evening, I sat in my apartment and waited. I knew Aven well enough to predict her next move. She'd try calling first, then texting. Then eventually, she'd show up at the apartment building. She was nothing if not persistent when she wanted something. I was right on all counts. The calls started at 6 p.m. I let them all go to voicemail. The texts began an hour later. "Drake, please call me. We need to talk about this. I know you're angry, but divorce isn't the answer. I'm coming over. We're going to settle this like adults." At 8:30, the building's front desk called to let me know I had a visitor. Aven was in the lobby, asking to come up. "Tell her I'm not available," I said. "She says it's urgent, Mr. Torrin. Something about legal papers." "Tell her to contact my attorney. The number is on the divorce papers she received today." I heard muffled conversation. Then the desk clerk came back on the line. "She says she'll wait." "That's her choice." I hung up and returned to my book. An hour later, the desk called again. "Your visitor is still here, sir. She's asking if you'll at least come down to talk." I looked out my window and saw Aven's car in the visitor parking area. She'd driven here directly from work, probably hoping to catch me off guard. "Tell her I'll be down in 5 minutes." I took my time getting ready, then rode the elevator to the lobby. Aven was sitting in one of the leather chairs near the windows, still wearing her work clothes. She looked tired, stressed, older than her 32 years. She stood when she saw me, hope flickering in her eyes. "Drake, thank God. We need to talk." "No, we don't." "Please, just 5 minutes. Let me explain." I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be one of the last times. 3 years ago, I'd thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Smart, ambitious, full of life. I'd been so proud that she'd chosen me. Now I saw her clearly. The calculation behind her smile, the way she positioned herself to look vulnerable and appealing, the practiced tone of voice she used when she wanted something. "You told me you were embarrassed to introduce me as your husband," I said quietly. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did. And you know what? You were right to be embarrassed. Not because there's anything wrong with what I do, but because you married me under false pretenses. You married a man you didn't respect, didn't love, and planned to replace as soon as you found someone better." "That's not true. I've read your text messages, Aven. All of them. I know exactly what you think of me and what you've been planning." Her face went pale. "Drake, the divorce is final. The terms are non-negotiable. You'll receive copies of all the evidence through your attorney once you hire one." I turned to walk away, but she grabbed my arm. "What about Vance? What are you going to do to him?" I looked down at her hand on my sleeve, then back at her face. "What makes you think I'm going to do anything to Vance? I know you, Drake. You're not just going to let this go." "You're right. I'm not. But whatever happens to Vance is a consequence of his own choices, not my actions." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Goodbye, Aven. Don't come here again." I walked to the elevator without looking back. As the doors closed, I saw her still standing in the lobby, finally understanding that her old life was truly over. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing with notifications. 3 missed calls from Vance, 2 from Aven, and a text message from Rex. "You need to see what I found. Can you come in this morning?" I smiled and got dressed. Phase 3 was about to begin. Rex's office smelled like coffee and old paper, a combination that reminded me of our military days when we'd spend hours poring over intelligence reports. Today felt similar, except the enemy was personal rather than foreign. "You're going to want to sit down for this," Rex said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. He'd spread out a collection of documents, photographs, and printed emails across his workspace like pieces of a puzzle. I could see financial records, phone bills, and what looked like surveillance photos. "Vance Monroe is not the man he pretends to be," Rex began, settling into his chair. "On the surface, he's exactly what you'd expect. Successful lawyer, devoted family man, pillar of the community. But scratch the surface, and things get interesting." He picked up a financial document. "First, the money. Monroe's been living well beyond his means for years. Big house, expensive cars, private school for the kids, country club membership, all of it financed with debt. He's leveraged to the teeth." "How leveraged?" "Second mortgage on the house, maxed out credit cards, even a loan against his 401k. The man is one missed paycheck away from bankruptcy." Rex pulled out another set of papers. "Which brings us to his creative financing solutions. Monroe's been padding his expense accounts for years, not just recently with your wife. Fake business trips, inflated meal costs, phantom client entertainment. He's been stealing from his own firm to maintain his lifestyle." I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my stomach. "How much?" "Conservative estimate? About $50,000 over the past 3 years, possibly more." "And the firm doesn't know?" "They're about to. Your complaint to HR triggered an audit of all senior partner expenses. They'll find everything within a week." Rex moved to a different stack of papers. "But here's where it gets really interesting. Your wife isn't Monroe's first workplace affair. There have been at least 2 others in the past 5 years. He showed me a series of photographs, Vance with different women at restaurants, hotels, business conferences. None of them was his wife. Sarah Chen, junior associate, 2019 to 2020. She left the firm suddenly and signed a non-disclosure agreement along with a settlement check for $25,000. Harassment settlement? Looks like it. Then there's Jennifer Walsh, paralegal, 2021. Similar pattern, affair, sudden departure, NDA, settlement. I studied the photos. Both women were young, attractive, professionally dressed. Both looked like they'd been carefully selected for their vulnerability and ambition. So Aven is just the latest in a pattern. Exactly. And here's the thing about patterns. They're predictable. Monroe finds young, ambitious women who are impressed by his position and authority. He promises to help their careers, starts an affair, then discards them when he gets bored or they become inconvenient. Rex pulled out one final document. But this time he picked the wrong target. Your wife isn't some junior employee he can pay off and silence. She's a senior associate with her own clients and reputation, and she's married to someone who knows how to fight back. I leaned back in my chair, processing everything. What about his wife? Does she know about any of this? Margaret Monroe? She's been playing the dutiful corporate wife for 15 years, but she's not stupid. I think she suspects something, but she's never had proof. Her social media posts are all about family and charity work, but if you look closely, she and Vance are rarely in the same photos anymore. She'll have proof soon enough. Rex nodded. The package you sent her will arrive this afternoon. I took the liberty of having a colleague monitor the situation. Strictly legal surveillance just to see how she reacts. And she's already contacted a divorce attorney, made the appointment yesterday right after the package was delivered. I felt a grim smile cross my face. Fast work. Smart woman. She's probably been preparing for this day for years. Rex gathered up the documents and photos, organizing them into neat piles. So what's your next move? I wait. Let the systems work. HR will find the expense fraud, Margaret will file for divorce, and Aven will realize she bet on the wrong horse. That's it? You're just going to let corporate bureaucracy handle your revenge? I stood up and straightened my jacket. The fabric settled over my shoulders with a familiar weight, the quiet ritual grounding me as I rose from the chair. Rex watched me with that sideways look he'd perfected years ago, the one that meant he was already running angles in his head. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee and paper, and the hum of the lights filled the pause before I spoke. Rex, the most devastating attacks aren't the ones you launch yourself. They're the ones you let your enemies launch against each other. He leaned back, folding his arms, a crease forming between his eyebrows. Meaning? Meaning by tomorrow, Vance will be fighting a war on 3 fronts: his employer, his wife, and my wife. He won't have time or resources to focus on me. For a beat, he just stared at me. Then a low laugh escaped his chest. Rex laughed. You always were the smartest guy in the unit. A corner of my mouth twitched despite myself. I learned from the best. I left Rex's office with copies of everything he'd found, plus a few additional pieces of evidence I could use if needed. The papers felt heavier than their actual weight as I tucked them into my bag, edges sharp, final. But I doubted I'd need them. The avalanche was already starting. Traffic crawled as I pulled onto the main road, the city sliding by in muted colors through the windshield. My phone rang as I was driving home. Patricia Wells, my divorce attorney. The vibration buzzed through the console before I answered. Drake, we need to talk. Can you come in this afternoon? What's wrong? I asked, already easing off the accelerator. Nothing's wrong, exactly. But your wife hired an attorney this morning, and he's already making noise about contesting the divorce terms. What kind of noise? He's claiming you obtained evidence illegally and wants it excluded from proceedings. He's also suggesting that your wife was coerced into the affair by her supervisor and should be considered a victim rather than a participant. I pulled into a parking lot and stopped the car, the engine idling while I stared at nothing in particular. Can he do that? He can try, but his arguments are weak, and frankly, they make his client look worse, not better. If Aven was coerced, then she has grounds for a harassment lawsuit against her employer. If she wasn't coerced, then she was a willing participant in adultery and financial misconduct. So what's his real strategy? Delay and deflect. He's hoping you'll get tired of fighting and agree to a more favorable settlement. I thought about that for a moment, fingers tightening on the steering wheel, the answer settling with surprising clarity. Patricia, how long would it take to add additional claims to our divorce filing? What kind of claims? Intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, waste of marital assets. There was a brief pause, papers rustling on her end. With the evidence you have? About a week to file amended papers. Do it, and make sure you include everything. Every hotel receipt, every lie, every dollar she spent on her affair. Drake, that's going to make this much more contentious. Good. Contentious means public. Public means embarrassing. Embarrassing is exactly what I want. I hung up and drove home, the tension I'd been carrying for days easing just enough to let me breathe. Aven wanted to fight? Perfect. I'd been preparing for war while she was playing house with her boss. That evening, I sat in my apartment and waited for the next shoe to drop. The place was too quiet. Every sound amplified. The tick of the clock, the distant noise of traffic outside. It didn't take long. At 7:30, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Drake, it's Margaret Monroe. I sat up straighter, instinctively. Mrs. Monroe, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I received your package today. Her voice was calm, controlled, but I could hear the steel underneath. Thank you for sending it. I thought you had the right to know. You were correct. I have a question for you, if you don't mind. Of course. Are you planning to take any further action against my husband? It was an interesting question, and I considered my answer carefully, measuring each word. Mrs. Monroe, I'm focused on my divorce proceedings. Whatever happens to your husband is between him, his employer, and his family. I see. And if I were to tell you that I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning, and that I plan to subpoena all of his financial records and communications, would that affect your plans? I smiled despite myself, a genuine flicker of respect. Margaret Monroe was clearly a woman who understood strategy. It sounds like you have everything well in hand, I said. I do. I've been married to Vance for 15 years, Mr. Torrin. I know exactly who he is and what he's capable of. I also know how to protect myself and my children. I'm sure you do. There's one more thing. I understand your wife works at the same firm as my husband. She does. She might want to start looking for other employment. I don't think Brennan Associates is going to be a comfortable place for either of them much longer. The line went quiet for a moment, the implication hanging there. Mrs. Monroe, I said finally, I'm sorry this happened to you. Don't be. I'm not a victim, Mr. Torrin. I'm a woman who's about to become very wealthy in a divorce settlement. There's a difference. She hung up, and I sat back in my chair with genuine admiration. Vance Monroe had no idea what was coming for him. My phone buzzed with a text message from Aven. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. I replied immediately, thumbs steady. You're right, it is getting out of hand. Your hand, specifically. You should probably call your lawyer. She didn't respond. At 10 p.m., I received one final call of the day. This time it was Vance, and he sounded desperate, his voice thin and strained. Drake, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but we need to work something out. I'm listening. Margaret filed for divorce today. She's going after everything. The house, the kids, my retirement accounts. She's trying to destroy me. That sounds like a problem between you and your wife. She wouldn't have done this without your evidence. You started this. No, Vance. You started this when you decided to sleep with my wife. I'm just finishing it. What do you want? Money? I can pay you. Just tell me what it'll take to make this go away. I almost laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. You can't afford what this would cost. Try me. Your job, your marriage, your reputation, and your freedom when the expense fraud investigation is complete. That's what I want, Vance. And the beautiful thing is, I don't have to take any of it from you. You're going to lose it all on your own. I hung up and turned off my phone, the apartment falling silent again. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new revelations, new consequences for the choices Aven and Vance had made. But tonight, I was going to sleep peacefully for the first time in months. The war was almost over, and I was winning. I woke up Friday morning to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The avalanche had officially begun. Most of the calls were from Aven, increasingly frantic as the night progressed. The text messages told the story in real time. Drake, something's happening at work. HR wants to see me Monday morning. Vance says they're auditing his expenses. Did you do something? His wife knows. She's filing for divorce. This is a disaster. Please call me. We need to figure this out together. I could lose my job over this. Please, I'm begging you. The final message was sent at 3:17 a.m. I understand now. You're not trying to save our marriage. You're trying to destroy my life. I made coffee and scrolled through the rest of the messages. 3 were from Vance, each more desperate than the last. 2 were from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Aven's friends or family members trying to intercede on her behalf. The most interesting message was from Patricia Wells, sent at 6:30 a.m. Turn on Channel 7 News. You'll want to see this. I found the remote and switched to the local morning show. The lead story was about a prominent local attorney being investigated for financial misconduct and workplace harassment. They didn't name Vance directly, but they didn't need to. Anyone who worked in legal circles would know exactly who they were talking about. The reporter was standing outside the offices of Brennan, Associates and Partners, explaining that sources within the firm had confirmed an ongoing investigation into expense fraud and inappropriate relationships between supervisors and subordinates. The investigation was apparently triggered by a complaint filed earlier this week, the reporter said. Sources tell us that multiple employees may be involved and that the firm is cooperating fully with authorities. Multiple employees. That meant Aven was definitely caught up in this now. My phone rang. Patricia Wells. Did you see the news? She asked. Just watched it. How did it leak so fast? Someone at the firm talked to a reporter. My guess is they're trying to get ahead of the story, show that they're taking action rather than covering things up. What does this mean for the divorce? It means your wife's attorney is going to have a very bad day. His client just became the subject of a public scandal, which makes her a lot less sympathetic in court. I could hear the satisfaction in Patricia's voice. She'd been practicing family law for 20 years, and she knew how public opinion affected legal proceedings. There's something else, she continued. I got a call from Margaret Monroe's attorney this morning. She wants to coordinate our efforts. What kind of coordination? Information sharing. Evidence that helps your case might also help hers, and vice versa. She's going after Vance's assets aggressively, which means he'll have fewer resources to help your wife fight the divorce. That makes sense. There's more. Margaret Monroe isn't just filing for divorce. She's also considering a civil lawsuit against Brennan, Associates, for creating a hostile work environment that enabled her husband's behavior. I sat down heavily. She's going after the firm too? She's going after everyone who enabled or benefited from the pattern of harassment. That could include your wife, depending on how the investigation unfolds. The scope of this was expanding beyond anything I'd imagined. I'd wanted to embarrass Aven and expose her affair. I hadn't anticipated bringing down an entire law firm. Patricia, am I in any legal trouble here? For what? You provided evidence of misconduct to the appropriate authorities. You filed for divorce based on adultery and financial misconduct. Everything you've done has been completely legal. But the consequences are the result of other people's choices, not your actions. You didn't force your wife to have an affair. You didn't force Vance to steal from his firm. You didn't force either of them to be careless with evidence. She was right, but I still felt the weight of what I'd set in motion. What happens next? We wait. The firm's investigation will take a few more days. The criminal investigation into expense fraud could take weeks. In the meantime, we proceed with the divorce on schedule. After Patricia hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and tried to process everything. 6 days ago, I'd been a man whose wife was embarrassed by him. Now I was at the center of a scandal that was making headlines and destroying careers. My phone buzzed with another call. Rex Morrison. "You see the news?" he asked. Hard to miss. It's about to get worse. I just got a call from my contact at the police department. They're opening a criminal investigation into the expense fraud. Apparently, the amounts involved are larger than anyone initially thought. How much larger? Try 6 figures. Monroe wasn't just padding his accounts, he was running a full-scale embezzlement operation. Fake vendors, inflated contracts, the works. I felt my stomach drop. Rex, I never wanted anyone to go to prison. Then Monroe shouldn't have been stealing money for years. This isn't about your wife's affair anymore, Drake. This is about serious financial crimes. He was right, but that didn't make me feel better about it. There's something else you should know, Rex continued. My police contact says they're looking at other employees who might have been involved. Anyone who signed off on fraudulent expenses or helped cover up the scheme. Including Aven? Possibly. She was Monroe's direct report, and she approved some of the questionable expenses. I closed my eyes. I'd wanted revenge, not to send my wife to prison. Rex, what have I done? You've exposed the truth. What people do with that truth is up to them. After Rex hung up, I sat alone with my thoughts for a long time. The apartment felt different now, not peaceful, but heavy with the weight of consequences I hadn't fully anticipated. At noon, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Torin, this is David Chen, Margaret Monroe's attorney. How can I help you? Mrs. Monroe would like to meet with you this afternoon if possible. She has some information she thinks you'll find interesting. What kind of information? The kind that might help both of your cases. Can you meet us at my office at 3 p.m.? I agreed, and spent the next few hours wondering what Margaret Monroe could possibly want to tell me. David Chen's office was in one of the older downtown buildings, the kind with high ceilings and wood paneling that suggested established respectability. Margaret Monroe was already there when I arrived, sitting across from Chen's desk with the composed demeanor of a woman who'd made peace with difficult decisions. She was younger than I'd expected, probably mid-40s, with the kind of understated elegance that comes from years of corporate social events. But there was steel in her eyes that reminded me of career military officers I'd known. Mr. Torin, she said, standing to shake my hand. Thank you for coming. Mrs. Monroe, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Don't be. These circumstances are long overdue. We sat down, and David Chen opened a thick file folder. Margaret has some information about your wife that you might find relevant to your divorce proceedings, he began. Margaret leaned forward. Mr. Torin, how much do you know about your wife's role in my husband's business activities? I know she was having an affair with him. I know she used our joint credit card to pay for hotels and dinners. Beyond that, not much. Margaret exchanged a look with her attorney, then pulled out a stack of documents. Your wife wasn't just sleeping with my husband, she said. She was helping him steal from his firm. She spread out bank statements, email printouts, and financial records across the desk. Vance has been embezzling money for years, but he needed help to cover his tracks. Someone with access to client accounts and expense systems. Someone who could approve fraudulent charges and create false documentation. I stared at the papers, trying to process what she was saying. Aven helped him steal money? More than helped. According to these records, she was a full partner in the scheme. Look at this. Margaret pointed to a series of bank deposits. These are payments to a consulting company called Strategic Communications LLC. The company doesn't exist. It's just a shell account that Vance and your wife used to funnel money out of the firm. How much money? Over the past year alone, nearly $200,000. I felt the room spin slightly. 200,000? Your wife would submit invoices for fake consulting work, Vance would approve them, and they'd split the payments. Very sophisticated, very carefully planned. David Chen pulled out another document. This is where it gets interesting for your divorce case. Look at these dates. He showed me a timeline that made my stomach turn. The fake consulting payments had started 8 months ago, 2 months before Aven's affair with Vance began. The business relationship came first, Margaret explained. The affair was just a bonus. I sat back in my chair, trying to absorb this new reality. My wife hadn't just cheated on me. She'd become a criminal. How did you find all this? I asked. I've been suspicious of Vance's finances for years, Margaret said. When I decided to file for divorce, I hired a forensic accountant to trace all of his assets. We found the shell company, the fake invoices, everything. And you're sharing this with me because? Because your wife is about to throw my husband under the bus to save herself. She's going to claim she was coerced, that she was just following orders, that she's a victim of workplace harassment. Margaret's voice hardened. I want to make sure that doesn't happen. Vance is guilty of many things, but your wife was an equal partner in this fraud. She deserves equal consequences. David Chen leaned forward. We're prepared to share all of this evidence with your attorney and with the police. In exchange, we'd like you to support Mrs. Monroe's civil lawsuit against the firm. What kind of support? Testimony about how the firm's culture enabled this kind of behavior. Evidence of the personal relationships that made the fraud possible. I looked at the documents spread across the desk, then at Margaret Monroe's determined face. She wasn't just seeking a divorce, she was seeking justice. Mrs. Monroe, I said finally, 6 days ago, I thought my biggest problem was an unfaithful wife. Now I'm learning she's a criminal. I'm not sure I'm the right person to help you with this. You're exactly the right person, she replied. You're the one who started asking questions when everyone else was looking the other way. You're the one who refused to be embarrassed into silence. She gathered up the documents and put them back in the folder. Mr. Torren, our spouses made choices that hurt us both. But they also made choices that hurt other people, the firm's clients, the employees who lost their jobs because of budget shortfalls caused by theft, the junior associates who were passed over for promotions that went to people willing to participate in fraud. I thought about that for a moment. She was right. This wasn't just about adultery anymore. It was about a pattern of corruption that had affected dozens of people. What do you need from me? Margaret Monroe smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, it was a genuinely warm expression. Just tell the truth. That's all any of us can do. I left David Chen's office with copies of everything they'd found, plus a new understanding of just how deep this conspiracy had gone. Aven wasn't just an unfaithful wife, she was a criminal who'd been stealing money while she planned to divorce me. The woman I'd married 3 years ago had never really existed. She'd been a carefully constructed facade designed to hide someone I never would have chosen to love. As I drove home, my phone rang one more time. Aven's number appeared on the screen, and for the first time in days, I answered. Drake, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day. I've been busy. Listen, I know things look bad right now, but I can explain everything. This whole situation with Vance, it's not what it seems. Really? What is it then? He took advantage of me. He promised to help my career, and when I refused his advances, he threatened to fire me. I felt trapped. I pulled into a parking lot and stopped the car. Aven, I've seen the bank records. The line went quiet. I know about Strategic Communications LLC. I know about the fake invoices. I know about the $200,000 you and Vance stole from your firm. Drake, I know the theft started before the affair. I know you were partners in crime before you were partners in bed. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, but she didn't speak. So please, I continued, don't insult my intelligence by pretending you're a victim. We both know exactly what you are. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. To the police, to the divorce court, to anyone who asks. You'll destroy me. No, Aven. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. I hung up and turned off my phone. The war was over. I'd won. But the victory felt hollow. The woman I'd loved had never existed, and the woman who'd taken her place was about to face consequences that would follow her for the rest of her life. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in my quiet apartment and begin building a new life. But tonight, I sat in my car and mourned the marriage that had died long before I'd realized it was over. Some victories, I realized, hurt almost as much as defeats. 3 weeks later, I sat in Patricia Wells' office watching my wife's life collapse in real time through a series of legal documents and news reports spread across the conference table. The headlines told the story better than any lawyer could. Local PR executive charged with embezzlement. Law firm partners accused of fraud scheme. Corporate scandal rocks downtown legal community. The criminal charges were filed this morning, Patricia said, pointing to the latest court documents. Aven is facing 5 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, and 2 counts of conspiracy. If convicted on all counts, she's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. I stared at the papers, still struggling to reconcile the woman described in these charges with the person I'd married. What about Vance? Similar charges, but his case is more complex because of his position at the firm. The FBI is treating him as the ringleader of the conspiracy. Patricia pulled out another folder. But here's what matters for your divorce case. The court has frozen all of Aven's assets pending the criminal trial. That includes her share of any marital property. What does that mean practically? It means you get to keep everything. The apartment, the car, the savings account, all of it. She can't claim any marital assets while she's facing criminal charges for stealing money. I should have felt satisfied, but mostly I felt empty. What about the civil lawsuit? Margaret Monroe's case against the firm is moving forward. They're seeking damages for the hostile work environment that enabled the fraud, plus compensation for the stolen marital assets that Vance spent on his affairs. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Drake, I have to ask, are you okay with how this turned out? It was a fair question. 3 weeks ago, I'd wanted my cheating wife to be embarrassed and exposed. Now she was facing decades in prison, her career was destroyed, and her name was synonymous with corporate fraud in our city. I never wanted her to go to prison, I said finally. But you're not responsible for that. She made the choice to steal money. She made the choice to participate in a criminal conspiracy. You just made the choice to tell the truth about what you found. Patricia was right, but it didn't make the situation feel any less surreal. There's one more thing, she said, pulling out a final document. Aven's attorney wants to meet with us. He's talking about a plea agreement. What kind of plea agreement? Full cooperation with the FBI investigation in exchange for reduced charges. She'd testify against Vance and provide evidence about other potential conspirators at the firm. I thought about that for a moment. What would that mean for the divorce? Nothing changes. The marriage is still over, the asset division still stands. But it might mean the difference between 20 years in prison and 5 years. And she wants my permission? She wants your support. If you're willing to write a character letter to the judge, explaining that you believe she was influenced by Vance rather than acting independently, it might help her case. I stared out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there, Aven was probably sitting in her own attorney's office, hoping that the man she'd betrayed and embarrassed would help save her from the consequences of her own choices. I need to think about it. Take your time. The plea negotiations will take weeks. I left Patricia's office and drove across town to Rex Morrison's place. I needed to talk to someone who understood both the military concept of honor and the civilian reality of complicated situations. Rex was in his office, feet up on his desk, reading a newspaper with Vance Monroe's mugshot on the front page. "Well, well," he said when I walked in. "If it isn't the man who brought down the most corrupt law firm in the city." I didn't bring down anything. I just asked some questions. Right. And Napoleon just took some walks across Europe. Rex folded the newspaper and gestured for me to sit down. "So, what's eating you? You should be celebrating. Your cheating wife is facing serious prison time, her lover is probably going to lose everything, and you're walking away with a clean divorce and all your assets intact. That's the problem. I'm walking away clean, and she's facing 20 years in federal prison. For crimes she committed. For crimes I exposed." Rex leaned forward. "Drake, let me ask you something. If you'd never found out about the affair, how long do you think Aven and Vance would have kept stealing money?" I thought about that. Probably until they got caught or decided to leave their spouses. And how much money would they have stolen in that time? Based on the pattern, maybe $500,000 over the next few years. $500,000 that belongs to the firm's clients and employees. $500,000 that would have been stolen from people who trusted them. Rex stood up and walked to the window. "You didn't create this situation, Drake. You discovered it. There's a difference. But if I'd handled it differently, how? By confronting them privately and giving them a chance to cover their tracks? By pretending you never found the evidence? By letting them continue stealing money while they planned to divorce their spouses?" He turned back to face me. "You did the right thing. The fact that it had consequences you didn't anticipate doesn't change that." I sat in silence for a moment, processing his words. Her attorney wants me to write a character letter for her plea agreement. Are you going to do it? I don't know. Part of me thinks she deserves whatever she gets, but part of me remembers the woman I married before I knew who she really was. Rex sat back down. What would you say in the letter? That she wasn't always like this. That the woman I married was kind, ambitious, but not criminal. That maybe Vance really did influence her to do things she wouldn't have done on her own. Do you believe that? I thought about it carefully. I believe she's capable of making better choices than she made. I believe she got caught up in something that started as an affair and became something much worse. Then write the letter. Just like that? Just like that. You're not responsible for her choices, Drake, but you're responsible for your own. If you believe she deserves a second chance, give her one. If you don't, don't. Rex pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. Either way, you're not the villain in this story. You're the guy who refused to be embarrassed into silence while criminals stole money and destroyed lives. He poured 2 drinks and handed me one. To telling the truth, even when it's complicated. I raised my glass and drank. That evening, I sat in my apartment and wrote the character letter. It took me 3 hours and 4 drafts to get it right. I didn't excuse Aven's behavior or minimize her crimes, but I wrote about the woman I'd married, intelligent, driven, capable of better judgment than she'd shown. I wrote about how Vance's position of authority might have influenced her decisions, and how the gradual escalation from affair to fraud might have made it difficult for her to recognize how far she'd fallen. I wrote about the importance of second chances and the possibility of redemption, even for people who'd made terrible choices. Most importantly, I wrote about forgiveness, not because she deserved it, but because carrying anger and resentment would only hurt me in the long run. When I finished, I sealed the letter in an envelope and set it on my kitchen table. Tomorrow, I'd give it to Patricia to forward to the appropriate people. My phone rang as I was getting ready for bed. Margaret Monroe's number appeared on the screen. "Mr. Torrin," she said when I answered. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all. How are you holding up?" "Better than expected, actually. The civil lawsuit is proceeding well, and my divorce should be final within a month." "That's good news. There's something I wanted to tell you. The FBI investigation has uncovered evidence of other victims, junior employees who were passed over for promotions, Clients who were overcharged for services, even some small businesses that lost contracts because of the fraudulent bidding process your wife and my husband were running. I felt my stomach tighten. How many people? Dozens, maybe more. The full scope is still being investigated. Margaret's voice softened. I know this is difficult for you, Mr. Torrin, but those people deserve justice too. What you did, exposing this conspiracy, it's going to help a lot of people get their lives back. After she hung up, I stood at my window looking out at the city lights and thinking about all the people I'd never met who'd been affected by Aven and Vance's crimes. The junior associates who'd been passed over for promotions that went to people willing to participate in fraud, the clients who'd been overcharged for services, the small business owners who'd lost contracts to fake companies. Rex was right. I hadn't created this situation. I'd discovered it, and in discovering it, I'd given all those people a chance for justice they wouldn't have had otherwise. The next morning, I delivered the character letter to Patricia Wells and signed the final divorce papers. The marriage that had started with so much hope and promise was officially over. Any regrets? Patricia asked as I prepared to leave her office. I thought about that question for a long time before answering. I regret that the woman I married turned out to be someone I never really knew. I regret that it took me so long to see the truth. But I don't regret exposing that truth, even though it led to consequences I never anticipated. And the future? The future starts now. I walked out of Patricia's office into a bright spring morning, feeling lighter than I had in months. The war was over, the truth was told, and justice was being served. Somewhere across town, Aven was probably meeting with her attorney, hoping that the character letter I'd written would help reduce her sentence. Somewhere else, Vance was facing the reality that his life of privilege and corruption was over. But I was free. Free from lies, free from betrayal, free from the burden of carrying secrets that weren't mine to keep. I drove home to my quiet apartment, made coffee, and sat down at my computer to update my business website. It was time to focus on the future rather than the past. My phone buzzed with a text message from Rex. Saw the news. Aven took the plea deal, 5 years instead of 20. You did good, brother. I smiled and typed back, thanks. Lunch this week? Absolutely. I'll buy the first round. I set my phone aside and got back to work. There were new clients to find, new security systems to design, new challenges to tackle. The game was over, and I'd won. But more importantly, I'd learned something about myself in the process. I was stronger than I'd thought, more resilient than I'd imagined, and capable of surviving betrayals that would have destroyed the man I used to be. Aven had been embarrassed to introduce me as her husband. Now I understood that the embarrassment was hers, not mine. I was exactly who I'd always been, a man who told the truth, kept his word, and refused to be ashamed of doing the right thing. That was enough. That was everything. The sun streamed through my windows as I worked, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and that was the best revenge of all.